Welcome to the third and final webinar in this series, Fatherhood, the Church and the First 1,000 Days. My name is Richard Lundy and I'll be hosting the conversation today. Sikunye is an initiative of common good, which is a non-profit that was founded in 2005, working to see people flourish, especially at key times in their life. First of all, in their first 1,000 days, then during their schooling career, and then while trying to find meaningful employment. And Sikunye is working to mobilize and equip local church communities to do what they can with what they have to see that all children get a strong start to life. Today, we have many people in the room attending from various parts of the country. We know that many of you are from different NGOs, from government departments, from academic institutions and local churches. And our hope in hosting this webinar series is that every one of us is more informed, inspired, and equipped to encourage fathers to be more engaged and participate in the lives of their young children. And we hope that the conversations have started in your context, identifying the particular issues and opportunities that exist where you are located. We don't want the end of this webinar series to be the end of the conversation. And tomorrow you'll be receiving an email from us with links and resources that were referenced in today's webinar. And I encourage you, feel free, like many of you already have, to forward that mail on to others who might find it useful. We also encourage you to keep the conversation going on social media. Follow us, comment, and share. And you'll be joining us and many others in discovering what else you can be doing to be seeing all children reach their full potential. Please introduce yourself in the chat box function. I see many of you are already doing that. If you're unfamiliar with the webinar function of Zoom, when you use the chat box, just remember to check whether you're sending a message to the panelist or the panelist and attendees. And we ask that you introduce yourself and share any information or any links that may be useful to other attendees. It might be a program that you're using to encourage fathers, some research that you find, websites, and so on. And we want learning to take place, not just from the panelists, but also from each other. Now, the main feature of today's webinar is that of a panel discussion. So please use the Q&A function of Zoom to be able to pose questions to the panelists. This is a little bit different to the chat function, so be sure to click or tap the correct icon when posing your questions to the panelists, and I'll be sure to be asking them that. Now, it's been 4 weeks since the first webinar, and for those of us who were part of it, that was a while ago. For those of us who weren't there, I'm going to remind us of what was learnt 2 hours worth into just a couple of minutes. Now, I can't do justice by trying to summarize everything. So instead, we're going to use one quote per panelist from the previous 2 webinars. Now, if you weren't able to join us before, you can get the recordings of this on our YouTube channel, which you can also find the links to that on the page where you registered for today's webinar. And we'll pop the links in the mail for you tomorrow as well. So starting off in webinar 1, Dr. Hilary Gooiman of the Western Cape Department of Health started off and said that from birth to the age of 18 months, the connections in the brain are created. I like to say, she says, faster than what I can click my fingers, at a rate of 1 million per second. Then Dr. Tawanda Makusha of the Human Science Research Council told us about the state of fatherhood in South Africa and shared that income, rather than race, plays a critical role in involved fatherhood. Professor Mark Tomlinson was next from the University of Stellenbosch, and he provoked our thinking and he said, there's no such thing as a baby, because a baby without a caregiver, without a mother, without a father, or someone to look after them will die. A baby is by definition in a relationship from the start. Wrapping up the first webinar, Dr. Deborah Hancock pointed out how the church and religion is pervasive within South African society, with 79.8% of the population indicating that they are affiliated with the Christian religion. There are approximately 43,000 Christian faith communities reaching every corner of the country. Starting up in our second webinar, Aphrodite, his given name is Terence Mentor, spoke of what engaged fatherhood looks like and said that being a positive or engaged father requires you to care for the mother, especially in the first 1,000 days. And he carries on, he says, notice I'm saying the mother. I'm not saying your wife or your partner, because I don't think you necessarily have to be in a romantic relationship with your child's mother to show that care. Dr. Linda Richter spoke into the barriers that fathers face and pointed out that 74% of young people are unemployed. And of those who are employed, only 30% are earning less than the minimum wage. And when you connect that, when you understand the average age of first birth amongst women in South Africa is 21 years, it becomes clear that most parents simply don't have enough money to support themselves and a baby. Terry Williams carried on with the webinar and shared some of his fatherhood story and shared that the church did two things for him. He said, the first thing is that the church reparented me. I met for the first time positively engaged fathers. He said, somehow in my family of origin, there weren't very many inspiring men at all. In church, I saw many men who loved their wives and loved their children. And finally, Olufile Masangane from Heartlines looked at messaging and those organic things that happen in churches. And he points out, this says, we need to expand the definition of fatherhood beyond provision. I grew up thinking that my father's lack of involvement in my life was because of finances, but I've had to unlearn all of that there is a lot more to fathering than just providing money. Now, as you can see, across this series, we've been engaging with experts in different fields on fatherhood, the first 1,000 days, and the church. And after hearing your feedback, we wanted to share a story of a local church that has taken steps to be more supportive to fathers and mothers with children in the first 1,000 days. We thought it'd be helpful to have a picture of what a church can be doing to strengthen families so that their young children can flourish. And in many ways, this is putting meat on the bones of what Dr. Hancock shared in webinar 1, that the church is a social actor and is using its assets to invest in families. And that is what a Sikunye is all about, working to equip faith communities to be first 1,000 day friendly, or FTD friendly. And so now we're going to be hearing from Pastor Errol Valentine from the Bay City Church in Muizenberg in Cape Town. And he's going to share with us how his church has become first 1,000 day friendly. And we don't share this so that you can copy them, because your context is unique. Instead, it is to paint a picture of what can be done through a local church when looking at strengthening families. Unfortunately, Errol could not join us live today and has pre-recorded his contribution for us. Let's hear from Pastor Errol Valentine.
Hi, my name is Errol Valentine and I represent the Bay City Church out in Muizenberg in Cape Town. I serve as an elder at the Bay City Church. My wife and I, we've been in leadership for quite a while, and we find this very exciting to share some practical things with you during this webinar. But before I continue, I would like to just say thank you to Sikunye and the team for what you are doing and have been doing, for engaging with us in such a beautiful way in the last few sessions. I want to thank the speakers as well. It's been really informative. I found that quite a lot of what has been shared resonated with us in such a beautiful way. And so just to give you some practical ideas of what we've been doing as the Bay City Church, and also through our non-profit organization called Siakula, which means we are growing. We looked at, the church firstly in light of, are we a adult-centered church or are we a child-centered church, or first 1,000 days friendly church? And that was quite important for us to ask that question quite a while back. And what we looked at, for example, is during our church services, we would have the children not, like when they come into church, go to one particular facility and separated from the parents. We let them sit in the service with us during the worship time. And then afterwards, they'll go to the different breakaway rooms. And we found that to be quite helpful, because we felt as a leadership that, once the children understand the Holy Spirit and what is happening in God, and a different idea of just that you kind of now come to church and you have to go quickly. And this is not a criticism on any other organization or church, but that we found that it was quite helpful that they feel part of the service and that they can participate in the worship. And also what we've done is we've created little play facilities for them in the service while it happens during worship, or they can engage with us. And then afterwards, they would go, after the worship, like I said, would go to the different classrooms and facilities. And we found that to be very helpful. We've had some people come to us and say, why are you letting the children sit in the service for so long? It's such a noisy thing. But we said, you know what? They need to catch what we are experiencing here, so that when they go up and have their worship time, they learn by seeing. And so we found that to be very helpful. What we've also done, and I heard this in the previous webinar, and it was such an encouragement to us as well, that we looked at our men's and women's toilets, and we put change facilities in there, nappy changing facilities. And what was quite helpful is that we had fathers come to us and say, thank you so much for thinking of us, for putting that facility in the men's toilet as well. And we found that to be quite helpful. And I heard a comment of one of the dads who said, my wife, she works shifts, and sometimes on a Sunday, it's my responsibility to take care of the children. And it's such a beautiful way, the way you guys have set it up, that I can go into the gents' toilet to go and be with my daughter, change her, and then to come back and to be part of the service. And we found those to be quite helpful. And what we've done in last year, as we know, lockdown was quite a hectic thing that took place. But also we found that our church, and like quite a few churches, we had to make a decision as to what we're going to do. And so what we've done is we've converted and changed our church into a relief care center from last year right into December. What that meant was when the government restrictions was taking place, and because we have the registered non-profit organization called, like I said, Siakula, as an essential service, we were able to provide food relief. And then we also, in addition to that, could connect with some of the congregants and people and others in the community. So what happened post that into this year, we felt that it was necessary then to look at the challenges people were facing in terms of mental health, just coping with what has happened around this pandemic and how people were also affected. And we've seen in all our different communities the outworking of that. And so what we started was Family Bubbles Group. And that was for mom and dads. And we found that to be quite helpful. What we do in the Family Bubbles groups, and that happens in the week, mom and dad could come, that we'll have playtime, play therapy, we'll have some information we would share, have a nice cup of tea or coffee and some snacks, but just have a time to connect with people. And sometimes it's not about running a program, we found it, but it was just being there for people and giving them the opportunity to talk. And so we had some volunteers and a coordinator on a Thursday, every Thursday that would take place. And we've seen that, because we had to limit the groups, become quite a key part of the life of the church, to the point that last Sunday we decided, because of the new restrictions that was announced a few days ago, to then take the church on a Sunday. We'll have a 15-minute input in terms of a preach, and then for the next half an hour, because we're only limited to 1 hour, we would then go into groups, and we divided the church up into various groups. So we're running 2 services to accommodate the volume of people in our church context. And we started little family bubbles groups. We call it a different one in the church context, where you would come and sit around a table with just a few people, and you'll talk about what the message meant to you. But it's also a wonderful opportunity to speak to a leader, to connect, to pray together. And so we found that the first 1,000 days, friendly church in particular, is something that is quite helpful to conceptualize. It's taking some things that are practical in your church context and in your community context, and see what is it that really works for you. And so for us, we started to look at these little hubs and what we call connecting points, that makes it quite easy for people then to speak to a smaller group, and then also to literally come together and to share God's word. What we found is that God's word is very clear, and we said this in a previous video, and I want to quote this. God's purpose in all of this was for us as the church to display his wisdom. And so this is important, that we as the church of God look at this, and how do we lead the way when people don't have the answers at this time? How do we not disconnect from people? How do we not take care of people? How do we not just push what the government has said and put it aside and say, okay, it's not really where we are. What are we going to do about this? I think as a church, we are called as the body of Christ to stand and to show wisdom by what we do, to make sure that we put the protocols in place, but not to step back, but to step forward. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to display the wisdom of God in light of where we all are. So we want to encourage you, wherever you find yourself, that for us, what has worked is to divide our church, for example, into small groups. And what was quite helpful, and I heard this in the previous sessions, that we've had fathers join our children's work. And we've looked at that in particular in this last few months. And so when the small groups takes place, that fathers and mothers are involved with teaching the children. So it's not just the children's workers, and we separate that, but we've invited couples and families to take care of the children during the allocated time. So while, like I said, we have worship, the children are with us, and then afterwards they would go to the various facilities, and we would have parents take care of them, and they're given a program in terms of a Bible study and or teaching and or an activity that they need to do. And so we found that those things were quite helpful. So I hope that by us just sharing what we have done is to help some of you and maybe some other ideas that you have in your church that would be quite helpful. Put it on the chat, put it on the group. I'm not able to join you today because of some other commitments, but I want to wish all of you well. And I pray that Sikunye will take this forum into a different era in the next few months, because I feel there's such a wonderful potential and momentum that has been created here, whether it's through a webinar or other creative ways that Sikunye always looks at training people. But I felt it needs more input, in light of where we are going, and particularly around fatherhood and what that looks like. I like the fact that with the previous speakers that we've also taken away that, or tried to help people understand that fathers are not just kind of pushed aside, and that the mother in this instance is a primary caregiver, but that there's also a role that we as fathers have to play. I have 3 beautiful ladies in my life, and I've seen as a father that, engaging with them is of utmost importance on different levels. So they work with us in the life of the church, they work with us in the non-profit that we have, and they help also to discover the gifts that God has given them. I pray and hope that this discussion and chat has been helpful and testimony, and want to wish you all of the best for your future plans. God bless you, and thank you, Sikunye. Thank you to the team. Thank you to the speakers.
Now, this webinar series might be the first time that you've engaged with Sikunye, and it is so great to have you with us. And besides webinars like these, Sikunye is working to support and equip churches just like the Bay City Church. And if you're part of a church community and want to explore this further, I encourage you to visit our website and see what else Sikunye offers, and perhaps figure out if that is some next steps that you want to take with Sikunye beyond this webinar series. In our last webinar, we heard from Olufile Masangane, and he shared with us the messages and the organic things within faith communities that need to be scrutinized to see if they are helping or hindering father engagement. And today we're exploring what are the structured programs that can be run within a community to foster fatherhood engagement. Now, you might be attending from an organization that runs a fatherhood program, and you're exploring whether a local church could be a potential partner. You might be here from a church or an NGO, and you're wanting to find out more about other programs out there. Or perhaps you're new to this topic entirely, and you have very few ideas and connections and resources. Our hope is that every one of us will gain clarity on some of your next steps to serve your community, to encourage fathers to get more involved in the lives of their children. Now, the next portion of the webinar, we'll be talking to 3 people who have been running fatherhood programs and initiatives in various contexts. We want to learn from their years of experiences, from their successes, from their mistakes, and their practical tips that can guide us in taking our first steps in encouraging fathers to be engaged. By way of introduction, we have Shuaib Salie from the Parent Center. Next is Pamela Kgare, who oversees the Fathers Matter program within Heartlines. And then Johannes Erasmus, who is a research consultant and has a range of fatherhood programs experience, including Legacy Dads and The World Needs a Father. First of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us today to be part of this conversation. And to kick us off, I want you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your program and how it works. And I'm going to ask Shuaib to kick us off first.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation, Richard. The name is Shuaib Salie. I am the fatherhood coordinator at an organization called the Parent Center. And our main objective with the fatherhood program is to get dads involved in the life of their children from the word go. And it's also looking at building a positive relationship between father and child. Yes, and with that comes a number of skills and training, and which we'll explore later. We are currently based in Cape Town, but we've also done this work elsewhere in the country.
Fantastic. So good to have you with us. Thank you. Johannes?
Yes, Johannes Erasmus is my name. And as Richard said, I'm a research consultant, and I work with The World Needs a Father on the fatherhood issues. So the World Needs a Father is a global movement, and it operates in about 100 countries worldwide. They run several programs on different aspects of fatherhood. We like to say that we train fathers to bring heaven home.
That's fantastic, Johannes. Thank you. So good to have you with us. Pamela.
Thanks.
Thank you, Richard, for inviting us. My name is Kgare, or Pamela Kgare, and I'm the project lead for Fathers Matter at Heartlines. So Heartlines is a values, we call ourselves the Center for Values Promotion, which is pretty self-explanatory, but Fathers Matter is an initiative of Heartlines that seeks to promote the positive involvement of fathers from the word go till the end, basically.
Fantastic. So, I mean, I know we have a short amount of time to be able to unpack what is decades of shared experience in the realm of working with fathers. So, Pam, I'm going to ask you first, how do you get the groups of fathers together? How do you get your program going? What do you do first?
Okay, so one of the ways we realize obviously the impact that the church has at a community level and the access that they have into families. So the church is a key stakeholder for us at Heartlines, at Fathers Matter, and we basically create resources for church leaders to be able to, we present to church leaders utilizing our reps across the country, and then they in turn can go into their church and mobilize the men within their churches to start what we call the Fathers Matter Connect groups. And the role of the Fathers Matter Connect groups is that fathers within the church are putting their hands up, are forming these groups with other men within their church. And the whole idea is that they connect, they're gathering, and the older fathers within the church are reaching out to the younger ones. And there's a cross-learning across culture and age, regarding the various challenges that they share. So that is one of the ways that we utilize in the church leaders, and fathers can also access us directly through social media, through our website, and through other partnerships that we have with other organizations. Yeah.
That's great. And if you are listening and are interested to find out more, in the mailer that you're going to receive tomorrow will be links to the site where you can find out more information. Sign up to their newsletter. It is excellent. Now Shuaib, you've been working in the fatherhood field on the ground. How do you get programs going with the Parent Center?
I think Pamela has brought up a very important point regarding partnerships. And earlier on, about 10, 11 years ago, going into communities, you realize that it is important to strike a partnership with the local organizations. So, for example, if I look at one of the projects that we've run was a program in Hout Bay or in Hangberg in Cape Town. And what we've basically done was to get a number of stakeholders involved, and we created a task team. So it would be somebody from the faith-based community, the churches, the schools, the mosques, from everywhere. Even Department of Social Development was involved, and we then agreed that the program will be run in that community, and it will be done from the primary school, which was at the time Sentinel Primary. They then provided the infrastructure, and then we got the school to invite the dads to come to the program. So, it's I think the key to your success of running the program is to really have true partnerships. That I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. There's so much that, if you're feeling like these big statistics of disengaged or uninvolved fathers, and you can feel overwhelmed and saying, we want to do something, but if you put in all of that responsibility on your own shoulders, you're gonna burn out so quickly. So I love what you're saying, is this sense of partnership, identifying other role players that can be part of the story of serving fathers and encouraging fatherhood engagement. And Johannes, I'm going to ask you, it's a big question, but like, what does success look like, within whatever fatherhood program, but focusing in on the ones that you've been running? What does success look like? What do you look out for? What are the goals that you have when running a group aimed at fathers?
I suppose, Richard, two things. The one would be have a theory of change, to have a plan thing, to have a thing in your mind that you aim for. That would be the one thing. The other one would be on a personal level. And if on sort of on a personal level, for me, it would be changed lives. But at the World Needs a Father, we have a theory of change. For Legacy Dad, we have a theory of change. We have outcomes for fathers, for mothers, for children that we particularly strive for, and that we also measure pre and post, so that we know that we're achieving what we aim to do. So I think you can approach it in different levels, but I think in terms of church, it would be changed lives. And if you connect people and someone's life is changed for the better, then I think it means something.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm going to prod you a little bit more there. What does changed lives look like? What do you look for that if you had to kind of get you look through the curtains of a family a year after doing the course, what do you look to see? Of course, you wouldn't do that. That's kind of creepy. But you're wanting to see something in action, right? What would you look for?
Richard, with regards to a child, so in Legacy Dad, we strive to get dads involved in a child's life. So we have two outcomes for the children. The one would be increased well-being, and the other one would be increased attachment to the dad. So we don't ask the dad about that. We go to the wife or the partner, and we cross-reference with her whether that has indeed happened. So for the child, so we also have outcomes for them. And similarly, for the mum, we know that the quality of the relationship between the dad and the mother, that plays a huge role, whether they live together or not, but the quality of that relationship. So we measure that relationship, whether it has improved due to the training or the program or whatever you have.
Yeah, that's so good.
Change lives, if I have to quantify in a sense, I'll try and do it that way.
Pam, do you want to add on that?
I wanted to add to that. Sorry. I wanted to say, often we build programs. Obviously, we have monitoring and evaluation that come alongside it. But I think at Heartlines, we've had this debate many a times around what change looks like. And for us, I mean, we won't always be able to measure what change looks like. But if we can shift the dial for a father who was not aware that his actions are very detrimental to the child, his actions are very, have consequences, serious consequences. If we can just shift knowledge, before we even get to behavior, if we can just shift from I didn't know, now I know, and to, oh, now I know and I can do something about it. I think that also is success, Obviously, the idea is that behavior is completely changed. But if we can also just shift slightly that dial, I think that is also powerful.
Yeah. And there's something quite beautiful when people are sharing what their experiences are, whether it's the story of their own father or whether it's their experience so far of being a father, that gives other people permission to say, wait, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that feels like this. And many times there aren't those spaces for men to talk about their fatherhood, their fathering. And so I know in all three of your programs, there's an element of doing it together, that it's not a self-study course, so to speak, but it's alongside other men grappling with this. But the question I want to ask is, how do you get people to sign up or participate? I mentioned that Sikunye works with church leaders. And one of the challenges that we face is trying to help pastors see the opportunity of the first 1,000 days, because many people just simply don't know. And once we have them in the room and we connect the dots, the eyes light up and say, okay, what's next? What do we do next? But we have the challenge of getting them into the room in the first place. Shuaib, you've shared with me before, what are some of the things that you do to help get men to participate, to sign up, or to join whatever program is that you're running?
Okay, so referring back to the partnerships, what we've done in the past, and we still do elements of it, was if I look at the Hout by Hangberg community, what we would do is put on comfortable shoes and khakis, and we would literally walk the streets and talk to the men, knock on doors, build a relationship, make it exciting for them to come to the program. Also, what I have found work in that particular community, and I'm contextualizing it now, is to give the men an invitation and say, come and share with us your parenting skills. It's not about us teaching them, but rather sharing. We've also introduced like an annual men's breakfast, within the community, and the school would usually host it. I remember one of the groups, the guys, we were walking the street. They then decided that, one of the activities is to make a pot of food on the fire, and we would run the workshop like that. So also as facilitator, as an organization, you also have to think beyond the classroom. So it needs to bring in that creativity. I mean, I've never facilitated in a school ground with a fire in the background, and I was thinking, how is this going to work? But it's probably one of the things that creates a huge success, because you captivate your audience and giving them knowledge or sharing the knowledge, but it was their idea, and they buy into the program, and that I think is very important.
That's great. Johannes, anything to add to that? How you get men to sign up or participate?
I'll give you an example, Richard. In the Nepal area, we collaborate with an NGO with the name of Enseba Trust, and they implement a reward system. So when the dad comes, he gets a certificate for completing the course. He gets a hat that looks like this. So some prefer this, and I know some men prefer this. So they get a hat, but we utilize ECDs because we know the younger the children are, the closer the dads are to them. So we use ECDs as conduits to mobilize dads to come to a train.
Yeah.
So the ECD principal also gets rewarded by points, and she can accumulate the points, and then she can buy stuff for her school. So in some sense, we work with a reward system in that particular context. So that's one way of doing it.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is, every context is so different. What might work so well in this community might not work in that community. And I think kind of summarizing some of what you've said, for attendees who are trying to figure out, can we or should we run something, there is this process of kind of mapping the community and seeing what's happening, what would work, what's going on, what's competing with us, and so on and so on. Pam, I want to ask you a question. It's very closely linked to how do you get men to participate, but what are those challenges that are faced when running a men's group or a men's program, not just to get them in the room, but during the course of it? What are some of the challenges that people might experience, and what are some possible solutions to overcoming those challenges?
Okay, so I'll give you a real example that we currently, are going through within Heartlines, Fathers Matter, is that a lot of our resources, obviously due to COVID, printing out resources and making them available to men and church leaders is a bit difficult at this time. And we've opted to go the digital route and making our resources available online. And obviously, by just making our resources only available online for download, we do exclude a huge number of men who might not be able to access, and so the challenge there is people often are on their mobiles and they're able to get to a resource quicker. So that's the pro. But the con is we do exclude a lot of men that are not able to have access to data that can therefore access our resources. And so we've had to find other ways to try and balance it out by utilizing community radio stations and those programs for those men that are unable to receive our resources, but also make sure that we're not leaving them behind in the conversation around fatherhood. So it is a challenge. It's one that we're looking at, and it's one that we'll modify. The beauty of having your resources online is you can adapt quickly, you can take feedback far quickly, and because people have access to their phones, they can access your resources quite quicker. But it does come with its own challenges, I must say.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for sharing. Shuaib, anything to add to that? What challenges have you faced when running the course? You've got the men gathered together, you've got the things going. What's going on that might get in the way of it being successful?
I think I have found in quite a number of the groups, when it is high season, when it comes here to November, December, January, it's not easy to run groups in those period of times because men find employment. And especially, if they've been unemployed for a while, that they would opt for that. So you kind of adjust your training like that. So that's the one thing on a programmatic level. But we've also found that a lot of the dads do not have access to their children. So the program, our Fatherhood program, is also linked with a counseling component, where dads can see the social worker on a one-on-one, a separate plan, because that's not something we cover in the actual training. So a lot of our training, and I'm talking about our general training now, has the option of a counseling component as well.
Gotcha. So it's not merely just, Shuaib, I just love what you're sharing, because what I'm hearing is you don't just run a course and the men will arrive, that there's some work that needs to be done to figure out when and how to run it and the location of it and the partnerships that take place. And that takes a bit of foresight and a bit of thinking ahead and perhaps partnering with other entities in the community. And I was reading this fascinating research article recently about baby theatre, and it was based here in Cape Town. And basically what happened was that fathers with their young children, very, very young children, participated in a play, in a theatre production. And the research was looking and saying, what impact does this have on the connection between the child and the father? And I'll put the link in the article in the mailer tomorrow. But it was demonstrating this incredible thing, that something creative, like having a father do a play with his young child, fostered a positive father-child interaction. And there's this multi-pronged approach that the article is suggesting, saying it's not just a course, not just a spoken message or a seminar or a pamphlet, but a whole range of activities can be used to encourage father engagement. Now, I want to ask you, and Johannes, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the creative ideas that you've seen in action to get men involved? You've mentioned the incentives for the ECD centers, but what are some creative ideas that you've seen that have helped to get men more involved in the lives of their children?
Who goes first?
You go for it, Johannes.
Okay. Most recently, Richard, we know that many men are scarred. We know men are perceived as the bad ones, bottom of the food chain at the moment. But we also know that men are scarred. And we realize that, as Shuaib just said, we have to do something. So what we've seen recently is that there's a workshop about the wounded father. And that helps to help men almost begin with the process of healing themselves. Because if it is 70% of children growing up without a father, there are so many of them living without a father, without a grandfather, and living with these scars. So how do we help them almost not get healed, but begin a process, begin to get aware of what this has caused in your life? Because if you don't have love for yourself, you're not able to give your child anything. Yeah. So to begin the self-heal process, to be able to have more to share with your child. So we are going to run now, and so from the end of June, we're going to run this this wounded father workshop for men, and see how that works out. That's one thing. So I confirm what Shuaib is saying.
But it's important what Johannes is saying there is that we parent or we father the way we were fathered. And so it's important that when men are not necessarily given that positive role model, it's very difficult for them to father and engage with their own children. But I think it's important that we make the safe space for men to be able to share about themselves. That's very important. I think over the last 10 years, I haven't had one group that is saying, this is the first time I'm talking about myself. This is the first time I'm talking about myself as a parent, because I used to babysit my children. But now I know I'm starting to pay. It's about parenting my child. It's also important the kind of messages, we're giving out there to attract fathers to come to these groups. In my Philippi group, we've trained, or I've just completed a group with a lot of artists. And so we tapped into that, where we use the arts and their language to get them to come into the group. So it's important that relationship, the networking, the partnerships are very important to get the men into the group, and the kind of messages that we're giving the men, that we are not just giving the ATM card and that's all we are good for. That there are other parts of me being as a man, of how I can be involved in the life of my child. Sure. And once we share those messages with each other, just a light bulb just goes on immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, so I can. So my child is born. Oh, I can kangaroo my own baby. I thought women could only do that. So it's that kind of understanding, and that's very important.
That's great, Shuaib.
And
Thank you for sharing. Pam, I know you guys have got some very creative ideas in Heartlines. What have you seen to get men involved?
Well, one of the ways, I'm just listening to what Johannes was saying, and I'm like, at Heartlines, we want to tap into that resource on the wounded father. And that's just something that we're missing in some of the work that we're doing. And I'd love to. And for me, that's it. We are all working towards the same thing. And we can all collaboratively work together. We're all coming at it differently, and we can all harness on each other's strengths. But I want to go back to the point around what churches can do. And I think the most practical thing is identify what the needs in your community are. I know Takalani Sesame was running a male caregiver pilot in the Soweto region. And they identified, obviously, due to the higher unemployment rates caused by COVID, men were just unable to provide for their families. And what they did is provide food parcels for those men. It was one of the ways they came to a workshop. They were also granted food parcels. So what Takalani was doing was actually meet a real need that has been caused by COVID and high unemployment rates. And they found that those men were actually willing to engage and willing to participate, but they were often held back by the fact that I need to be out there hustling for my family. I don't have time to be coming to a workshop. So find what the real needs are in that community and try and meet them as practically as you can, and support the men. And we'll find that men do come when the conditions are set there for them.
That's great. Pam, I'm going to ask you to keep your mic on, because in reading the Fathers Matters research, a term came up which was known as, which you've defined as gatekeeping. And can you unpack what gatekeeping is, and what are some of the things that you've heard from fathers about gatekeeping?
I was privileged, talking to our research, I was privileged to attend a lot of the focus groups that we ran when we were running our formative research process. And the concept of gatekeeping came up a lot, in that men often felt that the mothers of their children, especially when they're not involved in the relationship with the father of the child, often, were gatekeepers to the children. They basically would not allow access for men to be able to interact with their children, especially if they were unable to provide. So women are often seen in the space of, in the fatherhood landscape, especially in South Africa, women are often seen as gatekeepers that can hold the fathers back from engagement for various reasons, but some of them being the inability to provide. What is then your role? If you cannot, we are not together anymore, you cannot provide, then what use are you then in our lives? And that came up a lot in a lot of the focus groups that we ran.
So I think one of the dots to connect for panelists, for attendees who are exploring running this in their community is having open conversations around those very real things, that you can have men who are wanting to be active, but something put in the way of them being in contact with their children. And so it takes a whole community conversation to be able to create an environment where fathers can participate actively in the lives of their children. And I'm going to turn the corner a little bit right now and focus a little bit on the first 1,000 days, given that's the theme for the webinar series. One of the challenges that we have with fathering in that early days is men can't, they can't see baby while it's in mom's tummy, right? And they feel like they have very little to contribute, and they almost feel like I become a dad when baby can start talking to me or start interacting or start playing in some way. And so given your experience with new fathers, what needs to be different when thinking about a fatherhood program that's aimed at fathers in the first 1,000 days? Shuaib, do you want to kick us off on this one?
I think it's quite important for the dad to be able to support the mother. I think that's very important while the child, even before birth. And when the child is born and the baby's there and the father's present and involved, nothing stops him from, when the child has done the breastfeeding, to take the baby and burp the child. I won't remember to do that anymore, but to rub the child's back and see that the child is needed. Make that routine time. Get the child, assist the mom when they bath the child, or take the lead in terms of getting involved like that. Changing nappies, holding the child, playing. I know that sometimes we do get a little nervous when we have to hold this small baby, but it's all, and take small steps. And we always encourage for the dads to get as involved as possible and learn as you go along. Get the skills, with your little child, and especially if both parents are, there's one or first child, the firstborn, is to get involved with the baby from the word go.
Yeah, that's great, Shuaib. And Johannes, anything to add? What must we consider in terms of fathers getting involved in the first 1,000 days?
Good heavens, Richard, so many things, because it's such a unique opportunity. A dad has to know, because so many things happen to the child. I think you said that, Larry Huiman said, it's so many things happen with a child. A dad has to know that, to know how to respond to it. So that's the first thing. For the dad himself, there are so many things that are happening to you. You have to adapt your roles. You are into a new role. You have to find your way as a father, authentic father. And I'm not saying the dad is only the assistant of the mother during this period. The dad has an authentic caregiver role, because the child responds just as much to the father as to the mother in terms of development. So I would say that. So he has to know that so he can respond to it. He has to learn what the skill is of being a father, of being the new partner to this woman with this new presence of this little one takes away your life. So you have to adapt to that. And so you have to learn how to bring in other people into your support system, so that you can sometimes be alone and be able to survive. So there are, in terms of the dad, new skills. There are so many things. So I would say he has to know and to learn in terms of the child, but also in terms of his own development and in terms of his family relationships. It's all new.
That's right.
It's emotionally taxing, I think, if I remember correctly.
Let's just jump in there on that point that Shuaib and Johannes have made, that that support, especially throughout the pregnancy, is important. But we also need to be mindful of the fathers that, due to the internal migration, which is very high in South Africa, are unable to be with their partners during that period of pregnancy. Maybe it's a phone call, and I think we need to not have a blanket approach to that support, but to say things like, as the father communicates with the mother, it's to find out how their well-being is to try and get that experience, even if it's through the phone and it's them talking to their child, even if it's through the phone. I know it sounds silly, but what I'm saying is the father can try. Nothing is ever silly. Even if, the mother is putting that phone against their stomach and he's talking to his child, who's talking to, singing to them. But what I'm saying is the
Although
privilege.
it sounds stupid.
It does, but what I'm saying is there are other ways in which the bond can be formed, especially for fathers that don't have the privilege of being there or antenatal classes or going to the clinic with them and all of that. I just wanted
and
to.
that is, and Pam is correct. It's truly what is needed in the group. And you will be amazed. I mean, I'm always amazed by the creativity that comes from within the group. How they would share ideas. For example, talking to my baby, even if I'm not there, talking to my child, even if the child can't say a word. The creativity and will always come from your group. And I find that fascinating, that fathers want to be involved. And so we need to provide that space and opportunity for them to get involved.
Right. That's great. And we have time for one more question. I'm going to kind of bring two questions from that's been put in the Q&A box and kind of push them together. In the Zoom room today, we have people from very different contexts. Some from cities like the panelists that we're all in. We're in big cities, but we have people attending from rural areas, from smaller towns. Some with, Pam, as you mentioned, with great internet access. Some with not such great internet access. Some from different cultural practices of how parenting is done in different places and what was modeled for them. So I'm bringing those kind of questions together and saying, in the room with people with some from various different backgrounds, what are some of the kind of the minimum standards, the kind of the things that you have to do for a program to be successful? Again, whether you're in a city, rural, whether you're from this denomination, from wherever, what are some of the minimum standards? I'm going to ask whoever sticks up their hand first to answer it, because I know all three of you can. Pam, go for it.
And I mean, Shuaib and Johannes have spoken about this, but really we need in our churches, beyond the resources, let's create more spaces for fathers to connect, to talk about their challenges, even their fatherhood challenges. I think that doesn't cost money. It's men in your church, create those spaces for them to come together and to talk through how they were fathered, how they're showing up in their fathering. Those are things that don't cost money, beyond data costs and going places to attend a course. For me, that is one thing that the church can do. Create safe spaces for men in your congregation, even in the immediate community of that congregation, to meet, to talk, and to talk a lot.
Yeah.
Can I say, Richard, three things I would say. The first thing would be, if you want to engage dads and you want to change them, or you want to transform them, make sure that you are willing to stay engaged for a longer period, because men, they will have a need, and then there will be another need, and then there will be another. So you will journey together. So make sure that you don't just want to do a program and it takes an evening and it's all gone. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say, in our evaluating of Legacy Dad, we realized men love to play. So make sure you do things that are playful. Don't be too serious. Don't be too Bible punching. Be playful. Make sure, because men love to play. In their playing, they begin to engage, and they begin to engage with the inner selves as well. That's the second thing. The third thing is, men said, also in the evaluation, they love to share their story, because men are not allowed to talk about them being fathers. They talk about soccer, they talk about liquor, they talk about women and things like that. But they seldom talk about being a good father. So they don't always have opportunities to share how deeply they love their children. So they want to share their stories. So create an opportunity. Don't preach to them, but allow them to begin a narrative, find their own dad narrative. Allow them to talk and share their story so that they can inspire their peers.
That's correct, Johannes.
I can't agree more. Yeah, I can't agree. I mean, that is so on point from Pamela and Johannes. And one of the comments I would like to add is to make the men the most important part when you engage with them, that they are important. And the encouragement is that when they are involved in the life of their children, that it adds value. And that's important for them to understand that their life, that they have a contribution to make to family life. Because for many a times men think I must go out and work and that's where it stops. But we can, the encouragement of doing more than just providing financial, and their importance in the life of their children and their family.
That's great, Shuaib. Thank you. One of the questions that's come up in the Q&A box, which I would love to give Pam about 3 hours to outline what Heartlines is doing, but it's speaking to this picture of how many times in mainstream media, the dads are portrayed in almost always a negative light. Almost always being incompetent, bumbling, they don't know what to say, they're emotionally insensitive, they don't know how to parent. And so it's this message, this barrage coming. So I know Heartlines has got a whole strategy behind that. So Saviwa, that you posted that question in the Q&A box, please tomorrow when you get the mailer, visit Heartlines and see their strategy of how they're going to be engaging with mainstream media to re-narrate what fathers are and can be in South African society. Now, I wish and I long for that day.
To say amen?
You're welcome to say amen. I'm looking forward to the day when I can sit with all of you over a cup of coffee in person without a mask. I don't know how far into the future that exists, to carry on this conversation, because in so many ways we've just scratched the surface. And this is the end of our panel discussion. We're going to be wrapping up the webinar now. And we've been focusing across the whole webinar series on topics relating to fatherhood, the church in the first 1,000 days. And we really hope that this has been informative, it's been inspiring, and given you somewhat of a starter pack to get things going in your community. And we trust that you continue to explore this topic further with others. You know your context, your culture, what's going on. You know the big issues and opportunities that exist that can drive positive change in the lives of men and fathers in your community. And the goal of Sikunye is to see faith communities across the country doing what they can with what they have to surround and support families in the first 1,000 days. We dream of a future in South Africa where all children are receiving what they need to thrive and reach their full potential. We long for many, many communities to say, in this place, no child is left behind. And so if you're part of a faith community and you want to explore this some more, I encourage you to join Sikunye at one of our church and early life webinars. This is a free 2-hour webinar where we connect the dots between what science says, what the Bible says, and what churches can be practically doing. And we run these 3 times a month, so you can choose what time of day and week you can be there. The next one is happening next Saturday, the 19th of June. You can see the link in the chat box to follow, and it'll be in the mailer tomorrow. In that mailer will be other links and resources of things that were mentioned here. So if you're wanting to know websites and articles and things, we'll be sending that to you. Look out in your inbox. If it's not in your inbox by the end of tomorrow, please check your spam folder. Also encourage you to join us on social media to keep exploring these important topics, and watch this space later this year. We'll be hosting another series just like this one. And in line with that, we value your feedback. We'd like to ask you to answer a survey. Now, I know many of you switch off when you hear that. That's natural. There's literally 3 questions that we want to know to shape our next series. We want to know, first of all, how useful this has been. Secondly, what time of week you'd like these webinars to run. And then thirdly, what topics would you like Sikunye to be speaking into and gathering experts to speak into? The link to the form is in the chat box, and it'll be in your mailer tomorrow. So I want to thank our contributors today, Errol Valentine, Pamela Kgare, Johannes, Erasmus, and Shuaib, Salie, for your great contributions. We really do value your wisdom and your experience in this field. And a final thought from us as we close out this webinar series is from Gabriela Mistral. She writes, "Many things we need can wait. The child cannot. Now is the time his bones are formed and his mind developed. To him we cannot say tomorrow, for his name is today." Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you soon, and God bless and bye-bye.